Hi everyone, I'm Miss Eden and today we are going to be making a dish from Italy. You can choose to either make a simple bolognese sauce, which can go on pasta for instance, or you can add that to your white sauce and you can make classic lasagna. So let's make sure that we are ready for our practical or mise en place, that we have sanitised our surfaces, washed our hands, readied ourselves with our hair and an apron, and let's get our equipment and our ingredients and we'll go through those now. For your bolognese sauce you will need between 250 and 400 grams of minced beef or vegetarian soya mince, 1 carrot and 1 celery stick. You will need 400 or 450 gram can of chopped tomatoes, although passata will also suffice. You will need 1 stock cube. Beef is preferable, but obviously if you're making it vegetarian you'll want a vegetable stock cube. You'll need tomato puree, a tablespoon. We'll need some water, mixed herbs, salt and pepper, and 1 onion. If you are making lasagna, you will also need between 6 and 8 lasagna sheets, 30 grams each of butter or margarine and plain flour, 400 millilitres of milk of your choice, and 100 grams of cheese. One of the most important skills that you will learn in cooking is how to dice an onion. We're going to go through that now. But just a little bit of background first of all. You get different types of onions. You get white or brown onions like these ones, and you get red onions like these ones. Don't worry about the different sizes, they just come in different sizes. Now white or brown onions are best for cooking with, and they'll turn translucent when they're cooked. Red onions are best for eating raw. They're sweeter, they're crunchier, things like coleslaw for instance, they lend themselves better too. You can cook with them, but they tend to catch a little bit more and you have to be more careful when you're cooking them. So we're going to focus on the white onion today, and we need to go through a few different stages to make sure that we are doing this sufficiently. So the very first thing that we're going to do is to cut it in half. Now when I say in half, we need to make sure that we're following the right half. We want to make sure we're not going to cut it the wrong way. So you'll see here that we have the stalk. Okay, this is where the leaves and the flowers would grow from. And down here you'll see that this is the root. You can see the little root hairs growing out here. It's a bit more obvious in this one. There you go. So we want to make sure that we are always cutting from pole to pole, not around the equator. Okay, so from pole to pole, not around the equator. So we're going to cut it in first, because if it rolls, what do? We cut it in half. So we're going to cut it in half from pole to pole, from stalk to root. I'm going to use the bridge technique. I'm holding my knife nice and firmly with my thumb on the side like a magnet, ready to go, an extension of my arm. So through, a bit of a sawing action. They can be quite tough. All the way down, all the way through. There we go. And now we have 2 flat sides to place down. The next thing that we're going to do is to cut off the stem in each instance. So I'm going to keep my fingers clear using the claw. I don't want to cut off too much of the stalk, but enough to actually make it easy for myself, and I'm putting it in my bits bowl to one side. Claw, strong arm, bits bowl. There we go. Next, we're going to peel it. Don't bother trying to peel it first, honestly, it's so much more difficult. This way you'll find it a lot easier. Now if you just get your thumbnail underneath, you'll be able to peel the papery parts back. Go. This one's fighting with me a bit today. There we go. And we also want to make sure that we're removing any root hairs and any bits of papery outer off the chopping board as well, because we don't want to get in that food. It's not going to be very appetizing. If you're particularly struggling, or if the onion has quite a leathery outer layer, you can just remove the top layer. Obviously we don't want to do this on onions that don't need it, because otherwise they're just wasting food, but just for the demonstration purposes I'm showing you now. There we go. Okay, the next step we're going to do is to slice it parallel to the chopping board. Okay, parallel meaning two lines that never touch. So parallel to the chopping board, if chopping board's coming here, parallel this way. Okay, so you probably want to cut it just the once. If it's a very large onion, or if you're feeling a little bit more confident, you could cut it twice, 1, 2. I'm just going to cut it once for now. I'm going to use my claw, but I'm going to keep my fingers right at the very top. If I'm holding it back here and my knife were to slip, I'm going to cut my fingers. Okay, so fingers right up the top, coming down nice and low. I'm using a sawing action and a bit of a wiggle. And I'm not going to cut it all the way through. Okay, I've got it still attached to the root, about a finger's width from the root. Okay, so I'm going to do that to both. Remember, coming down nice and low, fingers clear, give it a wiggle, use a bit of a sawing action, go far but not all the way through. Next, we're going to cut columns. Okay, I'm facing you, so I'm going to cut columns this way. So for me, I'm going to be doing it, cutting columns towards the root. So the tip of my knife towards the root. I'm going to use the claw technique, and the closer the columns are, the better. So I'm putting the tip of the knife into the onion and pushing down. Tip of the knife, pushing down. Tip of the knife, pushing down. You can use a bit of a sawing action if you need to, if your knife is not very sharp. Now as I get closer to the end, you can see I haven't really got much to hold on to. And that's okay. Now I can use the bridge technique, but just being really, really careful of my thumb. So use the tip of the knife all the way down. There we go. So you can see my columns here, like a little fan, like a little flower, like so. Do that to the other one. Tip of the knife all the way down. Using my claw, always. If my knife were to slip, the worst that's going to happen is I'm going to catch my nails, and then just for the last cut, minding my thumb. Okay, we are nearly there. The very last thing we're going to do is we're going to do our dice. So we're going to cut it, it's like columns, but this time we're going towards the root. So we've cut it this way and this way, now we're going to cut it this way. We'll have lots of even, tiny squares. So fingers over the top. Now this time, rather than just balanced on the top, because the onion will like to spread out, to fan out, I'm actually going to use my fingers in the claw, but my little finger and my thumb are holding it on either side, so I can actually pick it up just like that. Okay, really keeping everything together. So all the way down, and there's my dice. Keep my fingers clear, always. And as I get towards the end, if I've got a little bit of extra, I can even just cut it free from the root, like so. Making sure I'm not getting bits of root hairs, bits of stuff that I don't want in there. And now I've left the root behind. Now the reason that we leave the root fairly intact is because it's the root end that holds most of the chemicals that makes us cry. If we limit the amount of times that we cut into the root, we are limiting the number of times that we're actually going to release those chemicals up into the air that make us cry. So I've managed to do all of that. Can't feel any irritation in my eyes at all. If you get a little bit, that's understandable. You're cutting an onion. It's probably going to happen, but this way you'll guarantee that you are less likely to cry. So I'm going to finish it off for my other side now. Remember, pinky, thumb, holding on, all the way down, all the way down. If I want, I can turn it around, keeping my fingers clear, and just cut a little bit more off and maximise the amount of food that I've got. Keep any bits that I don't want out of my food, and I've diced my onion. Next, I'm going to add my onion into a large saucepan. Now you need to add 1 tablespoon approximately of oil into there to start off with. Olive oil is preferable, it gives you a slightly more rounded, authentic Italian flavour. If you don't have olive oil, then you could use coconut oil, it's a great option. You could use sunflower oil or vegetable oil, something like that. If you are not sure about the quantity and you don't want to overestimate, then you can get yourself a tablespoon measure, and remember when it's level, that's the right amount. There we go, into there. Next, I'm going to add my celery. Now we want to make sure that you've washed it first, particularly down at the bottom, because when the bunch is together, sometimes you can get soil caught up around there. We don't want to introduce that into our food because that will obviously cause cross-contamination. So give it a little scrub. Okay, we want to top and tail the celery. We just don't want the parts that are not very appetising. Make sure that we're not wasting food, we're cutting off as little as possible. I'm going to put this in my bits bowl to one side. Using the claw, cutting it free. Now you can leave them large and chunky if you prefer, or you could cut it all the way down the middle. If you do so, keep your fingers nice and clear, like so. You can even stack them on top of each other then as well. Now you hold them together using the claw, and nice, small, even pieces, walking your fingers up as you go, making sure the pieces are approximately the same size. Slowing down as you get closer to the end. There we go. I'm going to put that into my saucepan. Next, I'm going to peel my carrot into my bits bowl, making sure I'm not getting everything everywhere. That's to the side. And you, depending on what kind of peeler you have, it might be a long one like this, it might be a Y-shaped one. You use what you have available. Regardless, make sure that your fingers are clear, okay? I'm not holding it down here, because if it slips, I'm going to catch my fingers. Okay, keeping my fingers round either side. And just a pro tip between you and me, if you peel the wider end of your carrot first, then when you turn it round, it's less likely to slip off, because it's going to be very slippery once you've peeled it. So I'm going to start holding it down the narrower end, peel it into my bits bowl, turn it round, and now I can peel the other end. Now, if you take off the end, but leave this end for now, okay? Now this is quite a large carrot. If it was a smaller carrot, I'd probably just cut all the way along. I'm actually going to cut this into 2, so it's a little bit more manageable. So we don't want big chunky pieces. We want to cut it nice and fine, or we can grate it. So I'm going to go through both. If you want to cut it nice and finely, you cut it down the middle. There we go, and then down the middle again, like so. And then using the claw, very much like the celery, I'm going to cut nice thin slices. The thinner the better, because then they'll cook more readily. Slowing it down as you get to the end. There we go. See how thin those little pieces are? Like so. Okay, you can add those into our saucepan. And the reason that we leave this end, if we are cutting it, is because as you get closer to the end, you still have something to hold on to, okay? Makes everything easier. Now, if we are choosing to grate it, we want to make sure we have a box grater like this or something similar, and we want the correct grating type. So we don't want a slice, we don't want this sort of intermediate one, that's a zester obviously, we want this one. This is for cheese, carrot and so on. So I'm going to hold it down. I can either hold it facing away from me or sideways, it's personal preference, just make sure you're not holding it by the sides because that's obviously very dangerous. I'm going to hold it away from me, take my carrot and nice long even strokes up and down. Now as we get towards the end, you can see leaving the top means that I have something to hold on to. Once again, makes it a lot easier. Okay, so as we get closer to the end, making sure that our fingers are clear, okay, because most people when they grate their fingers, it's because they're holding it sideways. So holding it nice and flat, nice, even motion, slowing it down, turning it around, trying to get as much out as I can and not wasting food. I think that's pretty good. There we go. Next we are going to crush our garlic. So if you have a head or a bulb of garlic like this, in order to get into it, you just want to use your thumbnail or maybe a knife just to get it started, get in, break it apart. So obviously I've already done that here. So I'm just going to take my garlic. That's a very small bulb, so I actually probably need a second one. There we go, like that. Obviously just remove any papery parts, pop it in your bits bowl. Now if you want to peel it, you can, don't have to peel it. If you do, then use the claw technique, cut into the root end but not all the way through, because then you can actually use that, it's like a tab, to pull the rest of it off like so. Now if you don't want to peel it, you don't have to. Get your garlic crusher, this is my one, I love this, I can highly recommend it. So it works by twisting. So pop them both in there, line it up, there's my saucepan, and then over the top and give it a really good press like so. Now one press will never be enough. You need to get a spoon, give it a little jiggle around, and then give it a second go, and you'll see a lot more come out. Then you can use your knife just to carefully release it, take out the waste and pop it into your bits bowl, ready to clean. Now the saucepan is going to go onto a medium-high heat for around 5 minutes. Make sure that you give it a little stir periodically. While I'm waiting for my vegetables to cook for their 5 minutes, I'm going to start on the white sauce if you're making lasagna. So I'm going to pop my butter into my pan. Wait for that to melt. And it's going to be just like last week. We are going to make a roux sauce or a white sauce through the process of gelatinization, where the flour starch is released and will thicken the liquid. Once my butter is melted, I'm going to add my plain flour and stir that in. Remember, we need to cook it for at least a minute, which is longer than you probably think. If we add the liquid in too early and it hasn't cooked, it will not thicken, it will just stay runny. And also give my vegetables a stir, make sure they're not burning, and I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Now I can add my milk a little at a time. Don't add too much at once. Got to make sure it's all added in first before you add the next batch. If it gets too hot, you can always, of course, take it off the heat and continue to stir. If you're agile enough, you can keep it on the heat, but if you're worried about it, just take it off. Not a problem. So I've just paused for a second to take my sauce off the heat because my vegetables have now had 5 minutes cooking at a medium-high heat. Now's the time we can add in our mince. So we're going to pop it all in. Make sure you don't have the paper. You need to break it all up, and you want to make sure that the mince turns brown. It needs to go from pink to brown. If you are using vegetarian mince or Quorn mince, it's already brown, it's already essentially cooked. It just needs to be heated through and added to your vegetables. So now a little bit of coordination is needed. I'm working on them both at the same time, just giving them both a periodic stir, making sure that mince is not burning on the bottom, and I'm adding my liquid in as I go. So once again, I've just moved my sauce to one side so I can deal with the meat and make sure that's not going to burn. I want to add a tablespoon of tomato puree. You can just approximate. If you want to use a measuring spoon, you obviously can. There we go. Stir that all in. You can see that the meat has turned from pink to brown. I'm also going to add in my teaspoon of herbs. There we go. So I have boiled a kettle and I have my stock cube in here, and I just want to add about 100 millilitres, not very much, just enough to be able to break it up in there. Now that my meat has turned brown and I've got off some of the excess liquid, I'm going to add my stock and my tin of tomatoes. So I want this to simmer for around 20 to 30 minutes until the sauce has thickened. Now remember, a simmer is a gentle, not rolling boil. Okay, you should see a few bubbles, but it shouldn't be bubbling vigorously. So if you see no bubbles, you need to turn the heat up. If you see too many bubbles, turn the heat down. Now I'm going to add around 2/3 of my cheese into my completed sauce. You can just take it off the heat and just stir it in. So as you can see, my sauce has thickened. That looks pretty great. And my meat sauce is very nearly there. While I'm waiting for that one to cook off and finish simmering, give it a periodic stir, make sure it's not burning, and I'm just going to get on with my washing up. So I have my meat sauce and my white sauce ready to go, and I'm very close to assembling it. That's the fun bit. But we've got to do one thing before we do that. You can do this on the hob as well if you wish. So here I have my meat sauce, and I want to make sure that this is seasoned to taste. So we have a stock cube in there which is adding salt and flavour, but we might need to add a little more salt, and we definitely want to add a little bit of pepper. So I'm going to grab myself a teaspoon and I'm going to taste it. Blow on it, make sure it's not hot. And I'm seeing what it tastes like. So I can taste the meat, I can taste the tomatoes. I think it needs a bit more salt. So I'm going to put my spoon to one side. I'm going to take my salt. There we go, into my hand. I'm going to add a good sprinkle of salt into there. And I'm going to mix it all around. I'm also going to add a little crack of black pepper. There we go. I'm going to mix that in too. Now I'm going to get myself a fresh teaspoon, because obviously we don't want to cross-contaminate. I'm going to take a little bit again, blow on it, make sure I'm not going to burn myself. I could taste that a lot more richly. I think it could even do with just a little bit more of each. And then I think it'll be ready to go. Learning how to season to taste is a real skill and something that you continue to develop, something that I'm still learning. But you will never see a chef just follow a recipe and send it out. They will always taste the food before they're ready to go. Now if you have a lot of liquid still in your sauce, because maybe it didn't simmer for quite long enough, you could use a slotted spoon if you wish, or you can use a ladle. You want to transfer around half of the volume of your meat sauce into your oven-proof dish. Make sure they're nice and close together because you don't want to make a mess. There we go. So I'm just going to smooth it around Presentation makes a difference, guys. Make sure you're making the layers beautifully even. Next, I'm going to grab my lasagna sheets. If you can get wholemeal lasagna sheets, even better. I couldn't this week, so I had to go with regular lasagna sheets, but if wholemeal, even better. So lay them down in your dish, nice and close together, but make sure you don't overlap them because they often don't cook readily and they'll get very rubbery. If you have spaces, then you can just snap it, like so. It never snaps evenly. Just do the best you can. There we go. That'll do for now, that's fine. Now I'm going to add a little bit of my white sauce. I don't want to add too much, I want the majority to go on the top, so I'm going to add about 30 to 40% of the white sauce that I have here to my lasagna sheets. There we go. And spread that around. Be a lovely creamy layer in the middle of your lasagna, but if you add too much, the top will end up being very dry and it won't have that cheesy, lovely, creamy, appetizing look that we're hoping for as well. Now I'm going to add the last of my meat. I'm going to try and sprinkle it around a little bit this time, because I don't want to have to push too much. Make sure you really scrape the sides, guys. More food, less washing up. There we go. Fabulous. Now I'm going to go back to my lasagna sheets. I'm going to try and do it in a different orientation this time, because obviously we had some broken bits down here. So I'm going to lay it down like so. Another nice big one here. And then use my pieces along the edge, just like before. There we go. I'm going to call that a day. Save the rest of that for another time. Now I can add the remainder of my white sauce. Yeah, look at that. Make sure you scrape the sides. More food, less washing up. You can even use a spatula if you have one which is heat resistant. There we go. Get that all the way to the edges. Covers all sins as well. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my cheese. Lovely sprinkle of cheese on the top here, which is going to give us that beautifully crisp texture and golden colour. There we go. Wonderful. So this is now ready to go into the oven. It's going to need at least 30 minutes and up to 45 minutes at 190 to 200 or gas mark 4 to 5, and you want to see the liquid and bubbling, and you want to see a golden colour to the cheese on the top. If you don't cook it for long enough, the lasagna sheets inside will not cook and they'll be very rubbery. So make sure it's at least 30 minutes up to 45. I'll see you back then. Well, I am really pleased with how that turned out. It looks golden, creamy, delicious. I'm really looking forward to having it for my dinner tonight. Always make sure, of course, that you're having it with a generous helping of veggies. I'm having one of my absolute favourites tonight, which is leeks and greens with garlic butter. So I hope you enjoyed making that with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.